Good afternoon. My name is Matthew Bucher, and I'm a student at Eastern Mennonite Seminary and the Center for Justice and Peace Building. In the summer of 2007, I started working with Mennonite Central Committee in Egypt. And if you have a picture of Egypt in your head, it's sort of a square. And I lived right in the middle in a town called Il-Qusayya. And Il-Qusayya is famous because it's believed that the Holy Family, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, visited this place when they were in Egypt. And it was a very fascinating place to live. It was a small town, but it was also sort of becoming a city. So on the outskirts, you would have farmland and donkeys would be going through the town, but it's also clearly transitioning to a much bigger place. And it was a very powerful experience to live in this town. There were people who would come and visit here from all walks of life, all religions, and from all over the world, because it was such a special place to visit. And it was a very unique place that was much more peaceable and much more tightly knit as a community than a lot of the towns around it, because of this special place where the Holy Family had visited. And in a time where maybe ethnic conflicts or religious conflicts or family quarrels would bubble over in other towns, they wouldn't bubble over in this place because the relationships were pretty strong. And it was a very transformative experience to live in a place like that, to see religious communities working together, not always perfect, but working at it because of this commonly held belief of a very special and supernatural visit 2,000 years ago. So when I was living in Il-Qusayya, I was working with the Coptic Orthodox Church. And if you haven't heard of that church before, it's a church that is 2,000 years old and traces its roots back to the Apostle Mark, who is believed to have traveled to Egypt in the 1st century. So it's a very old church rooted in this old tradition. And I was working for a man named Bishop Thomas. And Bishop Thomas is in charge of the churches in that area. And we were doing peace building trainings on different topics like conflict transformation, trauma healing, negotiation, and looking at how to bridge religious, class, and ethnic divides within the communities we were working in. And there are so many great examples from that time, and I'd like to share one with you. A lot of people saw on their TV screens the revolution in Egypt in January and February 2011. And this story, I feel, is not told on Al Jazeera or CNN, but it's a story that needs to be told. Bishop Thomas runs a retreat center just north of Cairo, and on the 3rd day of the revolts, something that President Mubarak did to try to show the country and show the world that they needed him to keep control of the country was that he opened the doors of the prisons and forced everyone who had been imprisoned out. And I don't know if you've ever imagined what you would need if you were a prisoner forced out of prison, but you'd probably need water, you need food, a place to sleep, and maybe a change of clothes. Because in Egypt, all the prisoners wear matching blue jumpsuits. And it would happen that there was a prison just north of this retreat center that Bishop Thomas ran. So prisoners started moving towards Cairo, because many of them were from there, and they started looking for these things, for food, for water, for clothing. And about 50 of them came into the retreat center named Anaphora, which is run by Bishop Thomas. And they weren't on the guest list, they didn't have reservations, but Anaphora is a retreat center. So when guests come, you host them. So they were given food, a place to rest, water, a change of clothes, and even some money. And after a few hours stay, they went on their way. And this event, this act of hospitality, is an amazing story in and of itself, but that wasn't the end of it. Bishop Thomas gathered all the nuns and the farmers and the international volunteers, and he said, we need to talk about this. What does it mean in a time of great instability, and we don't know where our next meal will come from, we don't know if we will have food for tomorrow, to still welcome and extend a hand of hospitality in this very uncertain time? And we don't do it because we think we will have food tomorrow, or because we think we have enough energy for electricity tomorrow. We do it because Christ commanded it. And that is why we extend this hand of hospitality that Christ extends to us. And I tell this story because it sums up 4 years of learning in Egypt. And I feel like I saw this hand extended every day. This was a major event, but this was not out of the ordinary for this community or for Bishop Thomas. They simply lived in extraordinary times what they were commanded to do. I was talking with a friend recently about how my experience in Egypt had shaped me. And this was a friend in Egypt, and he asked me, have you forgotten Egypt? And I said immediately this proverb in Arabic, ana shribt min al-Nil, which means I have drunk from the Nile. And if you've drunk from the Nile, you can never leave, you can never forget. And I can't forget Egypt. It shapes the way I think theologically, the way I want to live each and every day, and the way that I view the church, not just as here in Harrisonburg or the United States, but as a global church. And it continues to shape me, and I hope that I continue to respond and learn from the relationships and experiences of those 4 years in Egypt.